capacity building is key, and that probably applies to all levels of governance. From my personal experience and learning experience in implementing the German National Climate Initiative and also organizing the conference on knowledge exchange in Hanover last week, is that capacity building must come first, and then you can come up with attractive funding schemes. But if there is no response and no awareness, the most attractive funding scheme cannot really make much of a difference. So it's really important to follow a dual approach, basically, to have a robust capacity building strategy in place and to come up with convincing funding options. So this is in German, the motto, Klimaschutz braucht Initiative, which really means climate action needs initiative. And I really like the motto that you just introduced, Mr. Rathje, the mission possible. I guess that's a very good way to put it as well. My name is Jessica Suplie, and I work with the German Environment Ministry. I started working with the Environment Ministry in '95, mainly focusing on international issues, Biodiversity Convention at first for a couple of years, and then later on the UN Commission on Sustainable Development in the run-up to the Johannesburg Summit, which is already a while ago now, but I feel quite inspired by the recent developments in that field, which I think are also very positive for what we do at the local level and the national levels, the 2030 agenda and the emphasis on transformation and participation. So I joined the National Climate Division in 2011, and I must say that it has been quite a dynamic and interesting time span since, because of the Energiewende, which started in March after Fukushima, basically. And the ministry, of course, put a lot more emphasis on the support of the municipalities within this development. So the National Climate Initiative really is the issue here today, and I will give you a brief overview on the National Climate Initiative's basic facts and figures before I then focus mainly on the funding scheme for local governments, because I think this is the main issue of your work during this conference here. The basic facts are: the National Climate Initiative was designed in 2007 and then really rolled out its programs for the 3 target groups, municipalities, businesses, and private households in 2008. The total grant budget in the 6 years between 2008 and 2014 have been approximately it's a nice figure, 555 million euros. And there is a growing budget just before us, and we are very busy making new plans to actually implement this money well enough within the coming years. The key target groups have been just mentioned: local governments, businesses, private households, so consumers, and schools and kitas. Kita, I guess you all know, is the word for daycare facilities for children under age 3. So they are also entitled to propose projects, but I would see them as part of the local governments. Usually they are a target group. The National Climate Initiative really aims at fostering the implementation of the national climate targets. And the overall ambition, of course, is to achieve the 2050 goal, so climate neutrality, really, to respond to the conference's title, within the coming 35 years until 2050. The implementation of the climate initiative is to support climate action strategies at local level and fund implementation. We will look into the schemes later on. The climate initiative also aims at the diffusion of relevant technologies, for example, LED technology, which has been the burner, so to speak, for the first couple of years, in street lighting especially. It aims at capacity building, because before local governments can actually, or businesses or consumers, of course, can actually respond to funding schemes, they need to know about them, and they need to have a certain amount of training and awareness raising and networking and so on. So that's the strategic part of the National Climate Initiative. And of course, always with money and with keeping in mind certain ambitions and goals you have to monitor and evaluate, and that's what we do on a very regular basis. The milestones so far are the already mentioned figure of 555 million euros spent on CO2 reduction. We have supported more than 19,000 projects. With local governments, the figure is 8,000 projects in 3,000 places. And this has caused a reduction in CO2 emissions by 14 million tons up to 2011. So we are we have commissioned the next evaluation process, and we'll have fresh figures in a short while. So this is all pretty good so far, but it is not good enough. That's what we learned from the last evaluation at the national level. So looking at the CO2 emissions development showed us that we need to come up with an extra effort, quite a substantial extra effort within the next coming 4 years, because to reach the interim target by 2020 of minus 40%, we need to bridge a gap of 7%. These are approximate figures, but I think they're quite well known too. So an action program has been rolled out and agreed upon only in December, early December last year. Quite an ambitious program which sets out new additional efforts and measures which address all sectors. And of course, if you want to be successful in addressing and involving all sectors, you need to implement or install a broad participatory process. The format is called the Vienna format, with certain rules and a very transparent exchange of views among all actors. So that is the Aktionsbündnis to implement the Action Program 2020. And there has been one meeting a short while ago, and I was really impressed by listening, because that was really the role of the federal government, to be a key listener and to take upon all vantage points and views by the added value of having the various actors discuss the suggestions and the ideas. And of course, the Climate Action Plan 2050 is on its way, also on the basis of a broad and long-term consultation process. And there is the Local Governments Forum next Monday, I think, on the 12th. Professor Hohmeier would know better, but I'm sure it's soon. So local climate action, and I know this chart really doesn't correspond with the message, so don't look at the chart. Focusing now on what we actually do for local climate action, supporting local governments, we think that local governments are really key to achieve Germany's climate targets, because they can reach out to a wide range of actors at the local level. So when we succeed in truly responding to the local government's needs, we think that we can actually integrate the consumers' needs and potential, and also reach out to businesses, at least at the local level. The funding scheme for local governments, the so-called Kommunalrichtlinie, has also been started in 2008, and I think I said it before, it's 8,000 projects so far, which is quite good. 3,000 local governments are taking part. And last year we spent about 60 million euros. It's not good enough though. There are 12,000 local governments, depending on how you count them, but obviously there is a lot to do. So the Kommunalrichtlinie is being revised regularly, trying to respond to the needs of local governments and of course also to the growing ambition, as I just said, the Action Program 2020, also called for new and additional measures, and we originally did not intend to revise the Kommunalrichtlinie this year, but with the Action Program, we saw that there are so many new ambitions and tasks, so we had to go back and work on it, and we just published it last week. It was a pretty quick revision process this year, but I think it's quite good. And it's more easily said than done to actually revise in a useful way. We think that it's really important to listen to the local actors and to involve knowledgeable and well-connected change agents. Like here in your area, there are quite a few very knowledgeable actors. So that's part of the strategic challenge, to be quick enough with the funding and to be integrative and alert enough with developing the strategy. And what I've really witnessed is a growing demand for differentiated support. So I sometimes wonder if our flagship, the Kommunalrichtlinie, is actually fit for the future, or if we need to differentiate more. So that's an open question, but while we ask ourselves how to move forward with the funding, this is what we have now. Can you actually read it? It's pretty small, but the funding scheme falls into 4 main areas. And you could see a process in those 4 areas, because the first step would be to ask for funding to come up with a climate action strategy at the local level. And there is a special emphasis now within the funding scheme on local authorities that have not yet really decided how to move forward and who might decide to not apply for a grant to put down in writing a full strategy, but who would decide to go right for investments or do something else, or agree to a cooperation or whatever. So we think it's important to get them started, to let them take part in a very basic support to make up their minds and to start the first participation rounds and so on. This is what getting started means. It's the Einstiegsberatung. The integrated climate action strategies are really the core of the Kommunalrichtlinie, if you want. And there are various, I think it's 8 now, sectoral climate action strategies for those who think it's not worth going the integrated approach, but who think they want to put an emphasis on procurement or renewables or mobility and so on. And to implement the integrated or the sectoral action strategies, a local government can apply for climate action management, Klimaschutzmanagerinnen or manager. There are about 300 now in Germany, and they have the potential to really become the change agents at the local level. They can also apply for, but of course, a local authority without a climate action manager could also apply for further funding for investments. I mentioned the LED technology earlier, which was the key investment field during the first years, especially for street lighting. then we saw that funding was not really necessary anymore because the prices had gone down. So it's a classical, market diffusion situation, and we decided to take it out of the funding scheme in this year, so just last week, and I think this is good news for many local authorities. We re-implemented the LED technology funding for street lighting to actually, to get the best harvest of low-hanging fruits now for another round of 2 or 3 years. And then we see how it goes. And there's investment funding for building technologies, cooling, heating, ventilation, a small-scale funding. I wish there was more on sustainable mobility. And this is more a niche and not so attractive for many, but something you should get done, actually, if you have closed landfills, is the in situ reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And then something we put more emphasis on now in the latest version of the funding scheme is investments for schools and kitas, and we are really excited to see how this will fly. There are various new offers to invest in building technology, cooling, heating, ventilation again, and other rather low-budget investments. This, I think, is not so interesting. If the presentation is done later on online, you can look at it, but it simply shows that, of course, the lighting and air conditioning has been the major part of where the money goes. The climate action strategies, they get funding for a 1-year planning process. The local government will, during that time, look at priorities and spell out implementation in the various fields of action, and also involve the relevant stakeholders. This is obligatory, by the way, and we hope that local governments will pay more and more attention to the participation of all actors. And the local government will identify technical and economic potential for energy efficiency and carbon emissions reduction. And of course, there's also a limit to what the local government can do itself. And then the big issue is to start cooperation in a useful way. And as I said, this 1-year planning process will also set the basis for a longer-term participatory approach within the municipality. And every negotiated result or every concept is only as good as the support for it at the local level is, because that's where the implementation will take place. The climate action managers, is there a climate action manager here today? Because, okay, hi. Because it's, those are really the change agents who can, I think, talk about their experiences in a much more useful and an interesting way than we as the people who fund them. But what I think is the most important task of a climate action manager is the implementation of the local climate action strategy, be it a funded strategy or something that has been there before. And then to coordinate and manage activities within the municipality, meaning within the administration of the local government and also in relation to the various actors that are relevant in that area. Initiate and control climate action projects within the realm of the local government, energy suppliers, businesses, citizens, and I think that is very important, and NGOs. So local initiatives that have been there with good ideas could be approached and used as as actors for certain areas of the climate action strategy, and something that is very important, communication and environmental education. And there are various projects within and outside the climate initiative that do a lot on communication and environmental education. There are 2 quotes by climate change managers. And we see that, I think those are the most recent figures, the 284, but I'm not so sure, sorry about that, if the climate action managers in the follow-up project, because the initial funding phase is 3 years, and then you can apply for a follow-up project with new tasks, which is then 2 years, and we are thinking about a 5th year, a 6th year, so 1 year with a lower funding percentage. Before then, we would hope the local government realizes that it is useful and economically wise to have someone in charge for climate action. So I think the figure really is a little over 300, but I'm not quite certain. What we know, though, is that the distribution of those change agents is not quite equal in Germany, and the eastern part of Germany is sort of lacking behind, and we are trying to find out why that is. This applies also for the other areas of the funding scheme, but obviously once there is a climate change manager, for example in Dessau, you will see a lot of other projects sparking in that area. And of course, I know that Professor Ziesing talked about this before. The master plan municipalities, 100% climate mitigation, is those are really the pioneers that are very important for the development of the National Climate Initiative and to the achievement of the overall goal of the climate neutrality until 2050. An example of, you would say it's a village, right? The Stockelsdorf in Schleswig-Holstein. It's a small place, a municipality, which has followed a very strategic and steady approach in local climate action, applying for, and this is really typical for street lighting LED technology as early as 2012, then starting consultation for getting started, the initial consultation project in 2013, and has been starting an integrated climate action strategy in 2014, and has planned to engage a climate action manager very soon. So this is how we think the funding logic would work out in an ideal world, like Stockelsdorf. So challenges for the future, and those are really tied in the capacity building for local climate action that is partly underway, but partly also needs more attention. We have installed a focal point for local governments. It's the so-called Service- und Kompetenzzentrum Kommunaler Klimaschutz at the German Institute for Urban Affairs in Berlin and Cologne. It's a growing team, very knowledgeable, but also limited in capacities. So we think, a true scaling up, also with a view to East Germany and to small communities, we need to enhance this effort quite soon. Providing tools, of course, and instruments for the design and implementation of local climate action strategies. This is CO2 evaluation and so on. There will be an instrument called the Klimaschutzplaner in place early next year that we hope will make it easier for many local communities to address the challenge. We think it's very important to support a continuous dialogue and cooperation with the regional governments, with the Länder, the state level. And we meet twice a year. This is next to the official fora of the federal and Länder consultation process. And we think it's quite useful, but I also know that it would need more attention if there were more capacities within the ministries. But this is very important to actually see what kinds of funding schemes and framework developments take place at the Länder level, and to correspond to this, because oftentimes, of course, the Länder would challenge the federal level and say, you know, why do you think local authorities are your business? And we must pay attention to the development of Klimaschutzgesetze at the Länder level, because as soon as a local authority is obliged to imply a climate strategy, this local government could not apply for funding from the federal level anymore. So this is something we need to address in a dialogue and find solutions that make sense for the local authority. Good practice exchange goes with this. Know-how management, I think this is very, very important. If we look at the task to bridge the gap of 7% within the next 3 or 4 years, I think we need to spread the success stories and find more support. Replication encouraged, basically, and go for the low-hanging fruits, and you know, really broaden the support. And supporting participatory approaches and initiatives at the neighborhood level. This is something new, and we haven't quite put our hands on it, but this is something that will, I think, be very interesting within the coming years, to look beyond the local government level and to see what kinds of ideas come up and how to enhance and encourage cooperation within the local authority. And I'm sure that many local authorities will say, okay, this is enough now, federal government, please, this is our business. But I think, you know, with a good climate strategy in place, any local government would applaud initiatives that have come up with good ideas and who are ready to put time and know-how into the implementation of this idea, if only they had some kick-off funding. So this is what we think we'd like to see. And I'm still a bit inspired by the International Conference on Climate Action that took place last week in Hanover, and I share the results of this conference with you tomorrow. And the cool aspect about this conference was that we had actually 2 conferences in one public climate neighborhood, so a public event and meeting place with lots of innovative approaches and so on, next to the workspace with 18 workshops and so on local climate action. And then in addition to this, we had the transition movement led by Rob Hopkins from the UK, and that was really inspiring, especially with a view to supporting initiatives at neighborhood level. I think this is it, basically. Thank you so much.